was really nervous about teaching the class online because I've never done any sort of remote teaching. And we tried lots of different things. And in the end, I really felt like it was successful because the students responded overwhelmingly positive to the class. There were lots of discussions that we had where students mentioned that they were actually making friends. The students really bought into their teams. They oftentimes would have backgrounds that had part of whatever their team name was. Usually they would incorporate it into their backgrounds. Generally, the students, when surveyed, were overwhelmingly positive. Out of 60 students, 58 said that discussions were a lot of help. 2 said it was somewhat helpful, and nobody said that it wasn't helpful or not helpful at all. So really felt like it was a good experience. The students would come to discussion, they'd come to lecture, they were excited, they were actively participating in discussion. The cameras were almost always on, especially when the students were in the breakout rooms with each other. So, and by the end of the class, something that has never happened to me before, the students actually made a quarter book where they all got together, put together quotes and messages and memes and jokes, and gave that to me and the TAs. They also raised money for me and the TAs to donate to a cause of our choice. So by the end of the class, we really felt like we had come together as a community, and I was super grateful for the experience, and I was also just immensely impressed by the students' resolve to make the best of a very strange situation. So overall, I really was amazed by the experience. I thought it was very positive. So before the quarter began, I had never even used Zoom before. So me and the TAs actually spent a decent amount of time just on Zoom trying to figure out how to manage rooms, how to conduct polls, things like that. And then fortunately I had LAs. And so for our very first content meeting, we actually ran it much like we're hoping to run our first discussion section. And I was so thankful for the dry run because that's where we actually found a lot of potential problems. We certainly didn't catch all of them, but that really helped so that we were able to avoid some of, I think, the more common pitfalls just by having that, by that trial. Something else that I did to get ready for the remote teaching was attending some of the CEILS workshops as well, just to get some experience with how what kind of best practices there are for remote teaching. But really it was a lot of trial and error, and we figured out if things were working because we talked to the LAs a lot, and we also talked to the students a lot, frequently through surveys, just to make sure that what we thought was successful was actually something that was working for students. The very first discussion section, we had the students go into their breakout rooms. Because we had actually had kind of a trial run discussion with the LAs, we realized that we needed to introduce the students to certain Zoom features like call for help, like whiteboard. And we were like, yeah, they should be good now. So then when we actually had our first discussion section, the students had so much trouble trying to get an interactive environment working for them. So the very next day, what we did was we started talking to the LAs about what we could do to make this easier on the students. And we really felt like the thing we didn't want to do was tell the students that they had to do this in a certain way. There's lots of ways to use Zoom and to use Google Docs or use iPads and things like that. So we wanted students to kind of have control over how that experience went. So we had our next LA content meeting. We all talked about what worked really well that we saw that first week, what didn't work really well. And we actually, one of the LAs, John Shee, he actually came up with a really nice document that we could share with the students. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So this was just a kind of overview of the different things that we thought worked well for students, and we wanted our students to have access to this. So once that, once we realized this was a problem, we realized there were other things that the students could possibly use that maybe worked better for them. For instance, some really liked preview. After 2 to 3 weeks, the students had figured out how they like to use their workspace. I think the other thing that was a helpful way for us to get students to think about how they were using their workspace was every week we wanted the students at the very beginning of discussion to reflect on how the last discussion went and to have some concrete things that they wanted to work on. But we just made sure to keep a positive attitude, give them some options, let them have a place to kind of have a dialogue about it with their group and like air out some of those frustrations, hopefully in a way that could be more productive. The thing I think was the most helpful for our successful discussion groups really was that we had the same groups, the same teams every single week. And the teams only consisted of 4 students. So it was relatively small groups. These groups they stayed the same. So students could be frustrated, but then could work that out with each other and build this relationship over time. It was a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of things that didn't go exactly according to plan. But that's okay. The students really appreciated our efforts more than anything else, I think. So even if you're like, whoa, this looks like a lot of work, it is. It's true that you can't just put them into breakout rooms and be like, go. We actually had to orchestrate a lot of stuff on the front end so that things ran smoothly during the discussion section. But at the end of the day, the students could see all of the effort that we were putting in, and they really, really appreciated the fact that we wanted them to have this positive experience. So I think if you're interested in doing something like this, then as long as you really are interested and your TAs are interested as well, then the students will pick up on that and they'll probably be interested to try it out too.